Tonight, President Trump puts Iran on notice. Mess with us and there will be hell to pay. But will the Iranians listen? Or are we heading to war? Great. The president made the threat last night, tweeting, quote, to Iranian President Rouhani, never, ever threaten the United States again or you will suffer consequences, the likes of which few throughout history have ever suffered before. We are no longer a country that will stand for your demented words or violence and death. Be cautious. Oh, that is so stern. It appears the president was responding to Rouhani, who reportedly told a group of diplomats yesterday, quote, Mr. Trump, don't play with the lion's tail. This would only lead to regret. So many words. As you know, tension with Iran has been very high since the president withdrew from that nuclear deal. Crushing new sanctions are still a very strong possibility. And today, White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders said the president is only trying to protect the U.S. Watch.
The president's been, I think, pretty strong since day one in his language towards Iran. He was responding to comments made from them, and he's going to continue to focus on the safety and security of American people.
But critics have questioned the timing of the threat, saying the president could be trying to change the narrative after last week's controversial summit with Vladimir Putin. But could the president actually be trying to get the Iranians back to the bargaining table like he did with North Korea? Joining me now, former White House press secretary and author of the brand new book, The Briefing, Politics, the Press, and the President, Sean Spicer, is here. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you. I had such a good time last night. Thank you.
It's finally out. We're going to talk about the book in a little bit, but let's talk about the president. You know,
well,
obviously,
he's kind of in the book too. You know?
Yeah, his critics are so excited to jump on any perceived misstep. If he's too soft on someone, they attack him for being in Putin's pocket. But if he's too firm, he's leading us to the brink of World War III. So what exactly is going on with Iran?
Well, I think just that. I mean, Rouhani made a very stupid mistake by challenging this president. And I think the president has shown time and time again that he's going to punch back and that he's not going to take lightly to threats. That's what you're seeing right now, and I think you've seen it on a whole host of fronts, whether it's economic, on the tariff front or whatever. I mean, he knows what he wants to do, and he's going to do it. And I think that it was somewhat careless of the Iranian leader to do that, knowing the track record that he has over the last 2 years.
It's been a very difficult and confusing relationship with Iran. And, you know, the president has accused President Obama of doing what he was accused of with Vladimir Putin, and that is being spineless and weak and giving in way too much. So where do we go here now with sanctions and the deal? And is there, it's confusing with the president because his supporters want to believe that there is an overall plan. And, you know, there are things going on behind the scenes that perhaps we don't understand, but the president has an ultimate goal. What is the ultimate goal with Iran?
Well, I think the ultimate goal with Iran is to get hold of a better assessment of what they have and to prevent them from growing their nuclear capabilities in the future.
Is it a new deal?
I think he would like a better, you know, obviously he clearly didn't like the current Iran deal. He thought that the U.S., I mean, we literally brought pallets of money over.
Yes.
I think he wants to see some enforceable and tangible steps to ensure that you can verify what they're doing and they're not expanding their nuclear capability. So I mean, that's what he wants. He wants to contain their threat and then ensure that they don't create a future threat for us or for the region.
So how do you do that? Because obviously you don't want another war and you don't want to open up a new theater in the Middle East. That's a really bad idea.
Correct.
It's a bad idea for the region. It's a horrible idea for Americans. Mike Pompeo, unlike Rex Tillerson, seems to be walking in step with the president.
Right.
It seemed like, you know, Tillerson, there was a good cop, bad cop going on, but Pompeo sounds much more hawkish. Well, are they true hawks? I mean, is there a military aim here?
I think what you've seen is actually, I think, a diplomatic aim. I mean, that's one of the things he brought up that he talked about with Putin is how do we contain Iran and their capabilities, their current capabilities, and their future capabilities. So, but I think he's made it very clear that he hasn't taken anything off the table. He didn't like the deal that he saw. He didn't think it was enforceable and it was getting the results that it sought to do.
Are there people around him who are pushing him for military action in Iran?
I don't know. Obviously, I don't talk to him about that that
often. You talk to him?
I do. We generally don't get into Iran, though. I leave that up to Ambassador Bolton,
What does he ask you about?
It depends. I talk to him, like I tell people I like to talk. I'll talk to him when he calls, when he wants, and sometimes it's just to catch up. Sometimes it's
Is he chatty?
He is very chatty, absolutely, and he's funny and charming, and fun. So there's a side of him that I write about in the book that I don't think most people get to see, and it's something that is really a different side of him.